Alright, so tonight is the last lecture of the series Jewish Mysticism. It's about palmistry, astrology, and psychics, and many other ideas as well. Many components to mysticism, and a lot of it is fascinating. And tonight is a very loaded topic because I'm going to try to contain or to include as many of those that have not been mentioned yet, and discuss them just briefly so that we should have an understanding of what they are and if they're good for us or not. As of next week, B'ezrat Hashem will be going back to our classes, the regular classes. And for those of you who are interested, those classes are probably going to be uploaded to the channel on YouTube called Orach Chaim, ORACHAIM. And then there will be some, especially those in Hebrew and other languages perhaps, that will be in Torat Chaim, that channel, TORATCHAYIM. Various lectures have been uploaded everywhere, and what I'm going to try to do is perhaps organize them all into one website. As of now, they've been uploaded over the years by various people, and even though most of them are on 7200 Beverly, there are quite a few that are elsewhere, especially the ones on audio. So I'm going to try, when I have the time, to translate some of them to other language, as well as organize them better into one website where you can either see them either through a link or otherwise. There's a lot of valuable information out there that I've worked very much over the years to put together. And this is not just a superficial topic. This is really an in-depth topic of a certain chokhmah, a certain knowledge base that has always existed throughout history. Many nations have always been aware that they are supernatural forces, if we can call them. The only difference between the various civilizations perhaps was their attitude, their relationship with it, how they understood it, how they interacted with them. But there was an awareness and a certain acknowledgement that these forces exist. And Judaism is not an exception. As I mentioned last week, the Torah tells us, it's in the Torah, you don't have to go to the Kabbalah or the Talmud, you can actually find that the Torah warns us about some of these forces out there. One of the advantages that Judaism has in dealing with these topics is that Judaism makes a seder. It actually organizes for us, delineates, clarifies which ones are permissible and which ones are not, which ones are real and which ones are not as real. And ultimately the bottom line in Judaism is that don't get mixed up. Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. God is one. You may get confused. You may see all kinds of forces out there, as many have been confused to believe that there is a plurality of gods. Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, there's only one. He's responsible for everything. He created them all. And Judaism continues to remind us that not only did this creator create the world, but he also continues to be involved in everything that happens in this world. He actually listens to our prayers. We can turn to him. And this is an important concept that not everyone in the past has understood very well. All right, I maybe believe that God created the world, but I can speak to him. He listens to me. What difference does it make if I pray? Judaism clarified this point, very important point, that there is hashgacha. God is involved in this world. We may not understand why certain things are happening, why there's so much evil, for example, and there are lectures about that too. How come God allows all of this evil to run wild? And it appears, it gives the impression as though there is somebody else in charge. After all, God is merciful, He's compassionate, He's kind. Then why do these terrible things happen? So that's already covered elsewhere. But it's important to ask the following question. All right, if God is responsible and He did create all of them, what are they for? What purpose do they serve, all these supernatural powers? And the answer is, they are meshartim, mesharte elyon. A lot of the powers that exist, the spiritual powers, are messengers. They serve God. There are all kinds of them. Some of them are known as angels. So they were created for a purpose too. The problem is that not all of them are favorable to us. Some of them are not so good. Some of them belong to the impure forces. So it's important to be able to distinguish what we're talking about. Are we talking about one's mazal? That's a power too. One's astrological sign at the moment of birth. It has a certain power over him. It guides him throughout his life. It is also a form of spiritual power. Or is it an angel, or is it a demon? The forces, the camp of impurity. What is it exactly that we're dealing with? So when we talk about all this great knowledge, that is always going to be at the forefront. That is always going to be the question that we're going to ask ourselves. Yes, I'm impressed, and this may be real, but I need to make a determination. Is this kosher or not? Is this from the pure camp or not? Am I allowed to investigate this? Am I allowed to go consult with someone who can read my hand? Palmistry is also known as chiromancy. Very, very powerful. Very, very valuable, actually, knowledge base that has been around for many, many years. There's psychics. There are all kinds of people out there that know things, and they know what they know through different kinds of ways. And we need to clarify a little bit is, what is it that they know? Is what they tell us true? Where are they getting this information? So Judaism does us a favor. In the same way that the Torah clearly spells out what is permissible for us to eat and what we cannot eat, it does so too with all these powers and with all these knowledge bases. You may not have all the detail and all the information in the Torah. You have to turn to the Talmud, you have to turn to the Kabbalah to see if this is acceptable or not. But at least we get an idea that some of those powers are okay and some of them are not. Let's begin with prophets. You know what a prophet was? He was a messenger from Hashem, messenger from God in the olden days. Our prophets were also teachers. The prophets were also responsible for rebuking the Jewish people, telling them off what they need to correct, what they're doing wrong. Very important role they played during the time that we had them. But in order for us to trust them, they had to be special, not only in character, not only in their knowledge, but they had to prove themselves that they are really a link, a direct connection to Hashem. How do we know? Maybe he's just making up a story. Remember, a prophet is a very, very important individual. What he says is going to be taken seriously. But who's to say that what he's saying is the truth? Did God really send him, or is he saying it? So first, let's clarify that prophets did exist. We have many, many books. And we have many, many more prophets who did not write books. Only those prophecies that needed to be said for future generations were documented. That's what the rabbis teach us. That's our tradition. What we have in written form is what our generation needs to know. But there were thousands of prophets. But in the same way we had important real prophets, the Torah warns us, you're also going to have Nevi'ei Sheker. The Torah already tells us in advance. Watch out. Prophecy is powerful. Prophecy can be real. It's the closest link to Hashem. It's a message directly from Him. But you're going to have false prophets. It's just a fact. There are going to be individuals who are not prophets at all, who are going to claim they are prophets. And that's going to pose a problem. So what do you suggest we do? How do we know if someone is real or not? Well, there were exams. We do have a list of conditions that a prophet has to comply with. He has to fulfill. Just like with Mashiach. How will we know who Mashiach is? There is a list of what he has to accomplish. It's very simple. If he accomplishes everything on the list, he is Mashiach. If not, he's not. And Mashiach is a kind of a prophet, right? Even though his mission involves a lot more than just prophecy. So prophets did receive an exam. initially. After they've proven themselves, we didn't have to ask them to prove themselves over and over again. And my question is, well, wait a minute. Why didn't they examine every prophet? Why didn't they check him out to see if he's real? Give him the questionnaire. Ask him to fulfill the requirements to prove that he's a real prophet. And the answer is very simple. The power of the evil inclination back then for idol worshiping was very, very powerful. It was very, very strong, very tempting. People were misled. How could somebody be misled by all kinds of tempting, I guess, bait, you can call it? They were baited. They were somehow led to believe that there's some truth to what is being told to them. Maybe some people only wanted to hear the good news, not the bad news. And the real prophets were sometimes rebuking them. They didn't want to hear all the bad news. What's going to happen to them if they don't listen? So they went along with those that were giving them hope and telling them, oh, what you heard is not true, don't worry about it. And they were all false. So for a variety of reasons, people were tempted or led astray to put some trust into these false prophets, unfortunately. So what has happened ever since we had prophets? The rabbis tell us there was a yerida badorot. People have become spiritually weak. They're not as spiritually strong as they were in the past. And for that reason, we don't have prophets today. Every generation, depending on their spiritual level, had a certain closeness, a certain connection with God. Prophecy was a very, very powerful connection. But as the generations became weaker and more distant from that connection with God, they lost the prophecy. So what do we have today instead? The rabbis explain that right after the prophecy was lost, the Jewish people relied on bat kol. Bat kol is a heavenly voice. Occasionally, they would hear a heavenly voice, and those who were receptive to it, they knew what needs to be done. They were able to pick up on what the message from heaven is through a bat kol. Besides a bat kol, besides a heavenly voice, we've had Ruach HaKodesh, people who are divinely inspired. There are those who had Gilui Eliyahu, which is the revelation of Eliyahu, the prophet, either in a dream or in person. In various forms, the Gilui of Eliyahu would come and tell an individual what he needs to know. Another form of revelation would come about through a Magid. A Magid was a guide. And that's when we talk about psychics. When we talk about Magidim. I'll get back into it a little bit later. Magidim, all kinds of guides, spiritual guides, that somehow would reveal themselves to the individual when he was learning, when he was praying, when he was meditating. They would somehow hear a voice, either coming out from their own mouth or in their own mind. Somehow they would have this revelation come about through a Magid. And this is important to know because you may hear someone tell you, I can channel information. And this channeling perhaps is something good, perhaps not. We have to understand, first of all, where it's coming from. But it resembles, even though it's not exactly the same, perhaps a Magid, a form of revelation that comes about through a guide. Then, of course, we have dreams, Chalom. We've spoken about that separately. It is a powerful way, if it's a real dream, a clear, real dream that usually comes about early in the morning, right before you wake up. It could be prophetic. It could be warning you about something. It could be that it's a relative who had passed away, communicating with you, giving over an important message. There are real dreams. And a dream, rabbis tell us, a real dream is 1/60th of a prophecy. In other words, so it does resemble a bit prophecy, but it's definitely not close to what real prophecy is. And then we have something very interesting called Nevuah Shenitna Leshotim, a small-scale prophecy that exists today that little kids, especially those who are not so intelligent, who all of a sudden, out of nowhere, say something prophetic. And you wonder to yourself, where did that come from? How did he think of that? You don't expect it. But the rabbis tell us we have a tradition that sometimes the prophecy that we used to receive through real prophets, because we're on a lower level spiritually than they were back then, we do still receive it sometimes through a different medium, sometimes through children. I just gave you just a few examples of all kinds of information that we can receive, things that we can know from a higher source. Remember, the question will always be, where is that coming from? Is it from a pure force, a pure source, or not? What difference does it make? Well, if it's not a pure source, it could be a lie. It could be deceitful. It could be misleading. It could have some partial truth, but you don't want to rely on it. You don't want to associate with that. You don't want to get stuck with this. So therefore, it's important to know where it's coming from. Okay, so this is all an introduction about the various kinds of forces and knowledges and all kinds of means that civilizations had in the past and even in the present to receive information from above. However, there is a way where man himself can initiate. He doesn't have to receive this information from above in a very supernatural way. There is knowledge down here below in this world that has been given to us in various forms that man on his own can initiate, in other words, can figure things out on his own without contacting the supernatural powers. But once again, I'm not saying that all of them are acceptable. Some of them are not kosher. Some of them come from the impure camp. But it is possible for man on his own to be able to figure out certain things, to know certain things that are mystical, that are hidden, that there's no other way for him to figure it out. So let's begin with astrology. Now, with astrology, there's a lot of information that I've given over years ago. I think it's at least 8 to 10 years ago, when I gave a whole series about every single sign and in depth for men and women and children, from the Jewish perspective, of course. And those who want to know more about astrology, just listen to those lectures. I really think that they're quite extensive, not only in describing the various signs, but in understanding what it's all about. What I want to do right now is, since we're talking about all kinds of mystical energies and forces, I want to just briefly touch on astrology again, so people should not be confused. How does Judaism espouse astrology, especially if the Torah appears to say, don't go along with it? People are confused about astrology because astrology consists, for the most part, of two different separate components. Component number one, astrology teaches that the human being, depending on the hour of birth, location of birth, he has a certain mazal, a certain destiny. Now that destiny does not only govern his life as far as who he's going to marry and what kind of a job he's going to have, whether he will succeed or not, the struggles he will have. It's not just about his mazal, but it's also about his physical makeup as far as his nature is concerned, his character, his personality. Judaism puts a great emphasis on this component of astrology, not on the predictive one. The predictive one, the Torah says stay away from. And I'll talk about that in a moment. Why? Torah says there are certain things that will lead you astray. You know, it's not that if it's false and it's not true. No. It has to do with certain dangers, or with certain, let's say, reservations. The Torah says something may be true, but be aware, be careful. There are certain issues with it, certain things that are not exactly what they claim to be. So that's why I prefer to use Judaism accepts astrology, but with certain reservations. In other words, yes, but certain things we do not follow, we do not accept, we do not look into. So that which has to do with man's character and personality is a fascinating area. It's really fascinating. You can learn a lot about people if you know their sun sign, but just remember the sun sign is not enough. You need to know the hour of birth. Because people are made up of all kinds of things, including their upbringing, their education, the mentality of the country where they live, certain traits that they inherited, certain traits. And even then, after all that, there's a lot more than just the sun, the position of the sun, that influences character. So even though people tell you, oh, I'm this or I'm that, and you try to figure them out based on that, not everybody is the same. Even though they all belong to the same sun sign, it depends mostly on the hour. But there are other factors too, including the position of the moon, Venus, Mars, and obviously this is not the subject of tonight. But it is real. There's a lot of truth to it, and there's a lot you can do with it. But that which is predictive, to figure out the future, the Torah says, stay away from that. Why? So, okay, as long as you're using astrology to refine your character, to work on yourself, to know yourself or to know others, there's no danger, there's no problem. On the contrary, that could be beneficial. But using astrology to predict the future, to know what your mazal is, either out of curiosity or to follow it, literally, the problems are as follows. Number one, it has the danger, the potential danger of removing you, taking you away from faith in God, from emunat mimah. We're supposed to have sincere faith in Hashem, to turn to Him, to pray to Him, to believe only in Him. And this has the potential of moving someone away from that relationship, that special relationship with God. Plus, number two, a Jew is told that he can change his mazal. What if he's told, listen, you're only going to live to the age of 42? Well, he can pray, he can do all kinds of good deeds that may be able to change that mazal. So why just believe in that and give up hope? So we're told, be careful not to trust in what they tell you about the future. You can change your mazal. And number three, there's always the danger that one will be misled and go as far as becoming a member of the impure camp. Because these kind of things lead people astray. That is how paganism and idolatry began, by believing that there's all these kinds of forces out there, including this force, powerful force called mazal. Perhaps we should worship it, to find favor in pleasing it, in doing all kinds of things that perhaps will benefit us. But the Torah says, no, be careful. That's dangerous to you. There's a lot of people who are skeptics about astrology, and they say, oh, it's not true. You can guess a lot of what is being said. It hasn't been proven. A lot of astrologers have made mistakes, and what they say is not always accurate. All I will say for this is the reason why a lot of it is not accurate, first of all, has to do with that some astrologers are not as knowledgeable. In the past, they were much more knowledgeable. They knew a lot more. A lot of this chokhmah, this wisdom, has been forgotten. Just because something doesn't prove itself does not mean it's not real. It hasn't maybe been proven to everyone's satisfaction. But I can assure you there's a lot of truth to it. It's just that not everybody knows it very well, in depth, and that's why they make mistakes. If someone makes a mistake, does that mean that what he's saying is completely false? No, he doesn't know. That's all it shows. It is true, we have a tradition, it's true, and it can be demonstrated to a certain extent that there's a lot of validity to it. Judaism is a little bit different. Jewish astrology is a little bit different than non-Jewish astrology. There are certain concepts that appear in Jewish astrology. It's just like you have Chinese astrology. You have different kinds of interpretations about certain things. And that is why I don't encourage everyone to just look up his horoscope. Because first of all, it's very, very shallow. It doesn't tell you a lot. It's only a small picture. Plus, it has to do with the future. It has to do with all kinds of things that are going on in your life and nothing to do with character. So that which is permissible is that which has to do with one's character. Those characteristics, those flaws that he needs to refine and work on. So, should we learn it? Well, there is some benefit to astrology, as I said before. The only reason that rabbis discourage that the actual knowledge of astrology is because it's not always precise. It's not always exact. What it says is not always the truth. In other words, even if we claim that it has some validity, there is that danger that it may lead you astray. Plus, a lot of what it says will not necessarily come true. It is not a precise science. Is there any precise science? Yes, that's when we talk about palmistry. Palmistry, the lines in the hand, is very, very accurate. Much more, no comparison to astrology. Once upon a time, those two were very closely related, but they're very different. What we need to know right now is that mazal, whether it appears in the hand or whether it appears on a chart, is something that one needs to reckon with. It is a fact. One may ask, how is it possible that this power that we call mazal, that's coming from the stars supposedly, can reach Earth from such a distance? We don't see any lines of communication. We don't see any wires. How is it that some of these constellations at such a distance are able to influence us here on Earth? That's a good question. And the answer is, imagine, we are today sending signals to satellites and spaceships millions of miles away. They are receiving our signal that we're sending to them. So wait a minute, we can send signals millions of miles away to tell the computer, to give it instructions how to go around Jupiter, or how to move around one of the moons of Jupiter, or whatever it is that they're going to explore. We can send instructions millions of miles away, 1 billion miles away, and we cannot get instructions from there. People don't think about that. If man is able to do it in an incredible, sophisticated way, even though it does take certain amount of time until, but through the speed of light, it is able to reach the spaceship, the satellite, still, it does it. They can do wonders with those signals. Then why can't we get signals? Why can't we receive some message in some format from great distances? So today it is easier to relate to this. It is possible, even though or despite the great distance between the human being on Earth and these faraway objects. But speaking about palmistry, I want to remind all of you that palmistry is powerful. It is incredible. It is something that not too many people are familiar with. But it is something out of this world. If anyone knows this well, you can know just about everything about this individual whose hand is being read. In the palm of the hand, there are lines. There's other things besides lines. There's mounts. And of course, there's other things in the hand, including nails. But I'm not going to talk about the nails. I'm not going to talk about the mounts so much. Just a little bit about the lines. And even that, we don't have the time to get into it. I don't want to give a lecture here about how to read hands. As it is, this is something that's not always looked upon positively. People are afraid of it. People don't want to know. All I will do is share with you a little bit what Judaism has to say about it. And this, of course, has to do with extensive research that I've done years into this particular topic, in reading many books, and from experience too, various languages, in different cultures, and ultimately a lot of the books and a lot of the material sometimes contradicts or says different things. So you have to know to sift through that which is real and that which is alleged or just a theory. But this is something real. Similar to palmistry, there's something called chokhmat ha-partzuf. Chokhmat ha-partzuf is the knowledge of being able to interpret certain things about a person's character by looking at his face, by looking at his hair. In English, that's called physiognomy. that people who appear a certain way, certain features on their face represent or say something about them. Now, Chokhmat HaPartzuf is very limited to more of the personality of the person. It won't tell you his future, his past, and his present. It can tell you a lot about what kind of an individual he is. But even then, appearances are deceiving. You can't see everything. Perhaps they look nice, and inside they're rotten. Even though what's interesting is that the Hebrew word for face is panim. Panim from the word pnim. It shows the pnimiyut. A lot of the face, or a lot of the outside, does show a little bit of what's inside. This is perhaps a little similar on a minor scale to graphology. Graphology is relatively new. It is a science that says that you can detect or you can see a lot about an individual from his handwriting. There is some truth to this. This is more psychological. How a person writes expresses or brings out some of his inner nature in the form of writing. So same thing, it could be that the face obviously brings out certain internal features. I don't give graphology too much importance because there's so much you can tell by it. Palmistry, however, is a whole different story. Palmistry, if you see the Zohar has a whole chapter about it, is a real chokhmah. It's knowledge. And it requires tremendous expertise to be good at it. So let's begin to talk a little bit about what the rabbis tell us about palmistry. The Zohar says on the verse, Vata techezeh, Moshe's father-in-law, Yitro, after advising his son-in-law Moshe, you can't do all this work yourself, be everybody's judge. Appoint judges, remember? Delegate your work. How am I going to choose judges? They have to be truthful, they have to be courageous, knowledgeable. How am I going to know that? I'm going to interview. I mean, how much can you know about a person through an interview? A little bit, not too much. And you need people who you can rely on. God-fearing. Perhaps he's corrupt. Perhaps he's a liar. I mean, it would be nice if an employer could figure out everything about his employee. But nobody knows everything. So the Zohar says that it was revealed to Moshe, the way to know a lot about a person is through his hands. Look at his hands. Look at the lines in his hands. The sirtutim. The Zohar, however, goes to say that there's three ways to do that. There's chokhmat hayad, palmistry, that one can learn, that is the natural palmistry, where it follows certain rules. Basically, if you see the line, if it's short, if it's long, depending on its coloration, depending on its angle, depending if there's anything crisscrossing it, there's basic instructions that follows certain rules, and you can know a lot. And there is chokhmat hayad palmistry that is based more on Kabbalah. There's certain things that you can know about a person's previous life that you can't just see by following the rules of what the lines represent. There's perhaps another layer to it. And then there's the one, of course, that can be known through Ruach HaKodesh. If the individual is divinely inspired, then he will be able to see through the hand a lot more than the average individual. I'll tell you why. How do you know somebody's a liar? There isn't a big L in the hand. It's not like that. How do you know somebody's a liar? The reason why this is so difficult to know, in other words, to have a good understanding of palmistry, is because you have to put several components together. You see a certain amount of narrow-mindedness. You see perhaps a little bit of a nature that covets. You see a little bit of an imaginative mind. And you begin to see, oh, imaginative mind, narrow-mindedness, coveting. You're seeing the signs. I'm not saying that these are the signs right now, I'm just giving you an example. But you're seeing the telltale signs of potentially a liar, or one that may have a weakness. I'm not saying he's a reliable, one that may have a certain weakness. So the more one is divinely inspired, obviously he can see a lot more about this individual. So there are various layers, the Zohar says, in Chokhmat Hayad, known as palmistry. Palmistry, just like astrology, a lot of it has been forgotten. People don't know as much today as they did once upon a time. So if somebody's a skeptic and tries to ask you all kinds of questions, and somehow you don't get those questions right about him, it doesn't prove that this is not real. It just proves that this individual is not very well versed in this. This is an incredible, complex chokhmah, much more than astrology. To be able to know palmistry very well requires tremendous amount of expertise and experience. And today, even though there are some people who may know it somewhat well, they don't know everything there is to know. And they're not necessarily as good as the ones in the past. So a lot of this chokhmah, of this knowledge, has been forgotten. But now we've come to a very important question. Why did Hashem make these lines for? And by the way, these lines appear even in a little baby coming out of the mother's womb. As soon as that baby comes out of the mother's womb, you can already see everything about that little baby, about that little boy or girl. Their entire life is before you, if you know how to read it. It's incredible. So why was man created with all these lines? We're talking about all kinds of revelations, right? We started with prophets. There's an interesting pasuk, interesting verse in Iyov that says, "Biyad kol adam, yachtom bo ladat kol ish ma'aseh." I think it's chapter 37. In every hand it is imprinted, it is sealed, to know man's deeds. In other words, man has lines in his hand, something is sealed in his hand, so that one can know all his deeds. It is imprinted. Why? So the commentators explain, to reveal to him what he has to do, what he has to accomplish, what is his tikkun, what it is that he has to rectify in this lifetime, what is his ultimate purpose and mission in life. That appears in the hand. Now what if somebody does not know? He never asked somebody to read his hand. He doesn't know himself. And most people in the world do not know this. How will they ever know then what to do? Well, the good news is that we all have a mazal, like a GPS. It guides you whether you're awake or asleep. It will take you to your destination most of the time. Most of the time, people don't have to know what their hand says. Their mazal will just take them, and hopefully they will meet their right soulmate. Hopefully they will land the right job. As long as they're willing to work, they're not lazy. They will live out their life according to what is destined for them, unless they smoke 3 packs of cigarettes a day. Right, I mean, people can commit suicide. People can do things wrong. But if they behave normally, the mazal directs the individual to go wherever he needs to go, to move to a different country, to marry a certain individual. And even if he was already once married, who the second spouse is going to be, that's all part of the mazal. It's all part of the divine providence from above. Divine providence that uses the mazal. The mazal is just a medium by which it happens. How it will happen? Will he succeed in his job? Will he be liked by people? Are people going to sue him? Will he be in jail? All of that can be seen in the hand, and all of that is part of one's mazal, unless it's part of what we call free will, which I'm going to talk about that in a moment. But without knowledge of this palmistry, for the most part, one's mazal will direct him to what he needs to do and where he needs to go. What's the difference between the right hand and the left hand?
The right hand is stronger?
No, as far as the lines in the hand.
Oh.
The left hand, according to some interpretations, shows the potential. In other words, what was there from birth according to his mazal. There's several interpretations of what the difference between right and left. I'm just going to give you one that I basically understood from experience. It's all about experience, because otherwise you'll get different opinions. The left hand appears to show raw nature, potential. Potential, not necessarily good potential, but just basically what this individual is all about. The right hand is where he exercises his free will. How he developed. Did he work on himself? Did he refine his character? Did he become a better person? Did he maximize his potential? Did he do something beyond what the Mazal says? How is that possible? Yeah, through free will. There are certain areas in our life, only certain ones, where free will makes a difference. Are you going to be a kind husband or abusive? A good father or not? A gentleman or not? Honest or not? We can see the potential, we can see the raw nature, we can see what this individual is all about based on his mazal. Yeah, but he doesn't have to be exactly like that. When it comes to character and personality, you're not chained. You know, who you marry is not always up to you. There's something called soulmates. There's a certain individual who's destined for you, who's meant for you. Whether you have a good marriage or not is a whole different story. But what you do with yourself, how you relate to people, how you interact with them, do you behave yourself? Are you a law-abiding citizen? That's free will. Will you relate to God or not? Will you be observant, religious or not? That's all free will. So the hand shows a lot. Between the right and the left, you can see a lot about the present, about the past, and about the future of the individual. Since palmistry says so much, since palmistry contains so much information, it is something amazing. It really is something that if people understood it well, there's so much that you can tell about yourself and about others by looking at the hand. And I am very impressed by this. I think that the best pasuk, the best verse that describes how amazing this is another pasuk in Yov, I think it's chapter 19, that says as follows: Mi besari eheze eloka. I can see from my own flesh godliness. What do you mean, from my own flesh? Well, you can say that if you look at your digestive system, if you look at the anatomy of your body, if you look at the wonders that goes into the human being, yes, you can see godliness. Who arranged all of this? How does it all function so properly, so beautifully? Look at the design. Yes, but another meaning in this pasuk is Mi besari eheze eloka. If you look at the hand, even from a baby, you can see the Yad Hashem mechavenet bo. You can actually see the hand of God that's guiding this individual, that has imprinted in his hand from the moment of birth his entire map, for the entire map of his life. So, what's the next question? Then why doesn't everybody go have his hand read? And the reason for that, part of the reason for that, is because there's a lot of charlatans out there. People who take your money and tell you all kinds of, as we say in Yiddish, babamaises, nonsense, or in Arabic, kalam fadi, or in Spanish, disparates, nonsense. And they took your money too. So not only didn't they tell you the truth, well, actually, maybe they tell you some things that are true. I see you're going to have 2 boys and 2 girls. It's possible to know, by the way. It's a lot clearer in a woman's hand than in a man's hand. Okay, what about everything else? So maybe they know some things, or they're complete charlatans. Don't go to these people unless you know that this guy is an expert. And even then, what do you want to know? What benefit will we receive from someone? And the answer is as follows. The real benefit that one can receive, as long as the individual is an expert, is as follows. From the hand, one can tell weaknesses, whether it's health weaknesses or whether it's weaknesses in one's character. Well, if a person sees that these are the weaknesses in his character, well, that already tells him what he needs to work on. He needs to correct them. If he sees certain weaknesses in his health, he has to be extra careful from those things that will damage his health even further. Some people are more sensitive to alcohol than others. Some people are more sensitive to smoking. I mean, smoking in itself is not so healthy, but depending on the composition, the physical disposition, I should say, of this individual, certain things may be more troublesome in the future. So he can be warned in advance. A lot of times people can be helped in restoring the peace at home, in saving their marriage by telling them, sir, you're stingy. You're a stingy man. And listen, if you continue to be like that, you're going to end up divorcing. Or you're a very abusive individual. Or, I have to be fair, or the woman, she's too materialistic. She's very demanding and wants expensive jewelry. Well, if the guy is a good guy, but he can't afford it, she may lose a good husband who may not tolerate this for too long. So there are times that one can gain a lot of insight into a person's personality and life to see what's going on and be of some help to these people. Then, of course, there is the possibility of awakening someone to do teshuvah. Listen, if you don't do teshuvah, you don't repent, you don't correct your ways, you may not stick around in this world for too long. There are certain warnings here. You're going to end up in some trouble. There may be an accident, chas v'shalom, along the way. What did we say before? If a person takes matters into his hands seriously, to change himself, to be a better person, he has a chance of changing his mazal. It's not always easy, but it's possible. Through prayer, through repentance, and through charity especially. One can sometimes achieve that change. So don't give up hope. But take this seriously. So in the same way that the prophets many times warned us, if you don't follow the mitzvot of Hashem, this is what's going to happen. We've lost the first temple. We've lost the second temple. We've been in exile for almost 2,000 years. All the prophecies have come true. All the bad ones. And by the way, that's how we know that the good ones will also come true. If all the bad ones came true, and all what they promised us, the good ones will come true. The Jewish people are back in Israel after close to 2,000 years. That's one of the prophecies. They're all going back home. There's over 6 million Jews already there. In the year 1900, there was only 8,000. What happened? We're seeing prophecy being fulfilled. We see that this is real. No one can deny this. This is not an accident. So you can tell this individual, listen, if you don't behave yourself, if you don't take matters seriously to change your personality or whatever is wrong, then you're just going to go along with your mazal, and that mazal is not always something so positive unless he takes matters into his hand early enough to make the necessary changes. Then he has a chance. Another benefit that I find from the lines in the hands, is that sometimes an individual has what we call a potential that is dormant. He's really capable of being a musician or an artist, and he's not aware of it. Parents don't always give their kids lessons on piano or some musical instrument, and the child may be very musical. And it's a shame for him not to develop this talent where he will eventually excel. Now, he will still succeed in life if his mazal is to succeed. Don't get me wrong. But the quality of life can be enhanced if a person's potential is maximized. He'll be happier with himself. He'll derive perhaps more satisfaction in all of the things that he takes upon himself to do, additional hobbies and interests, because he's talented. And that can also be seen in the hand. But again, I go back to what we said before. There are a lot of people who are going to complain, there's no empirical evidence that this is real. First of all, when it comes to palmistry, there is some medical evidence. There are some doctors in the world that actually look for certain signs in the hand to determine certain areas that may need attention. So there is some evidence that some things do appear in the hand. But again, empirical evidence, I'll give you a good reason why there is no empirical evidence. Not only did people forget, Hashem intentionally does not want this to be very, very clear. There's always this element of concealment of Hashem in order to enable free will. Because if an atheist were to clearly see that this is 100% true, then how does he explain that a baby is born with his entire destiny written there in his hand? By evolution? It's impossible. One's destiny, one's map of life, one's mission is all there. And if it's there from birth, how do you explain it unless you see clearly that this is from heaven, from Shamayim? As we said before, it's imprinted in his hand from the moment he's born what his mission will be, what he needs to accomplish. He is given the tools to accomplish that goal. The weaknesses too. The weaknesses are part of the things that one has to work on and deal with. Life is not perfect. It has its ups and downs. People get sick, even if they follow a strict diet. I mean, there's genes that you inherited. We don't have control over everything. But it's good to know, if possible, ahead of time, that I may have to contend with this. Because if you know ahead of time certain things, it is easier to live with. However, I would not recommend one to know everything about his life, especially the future, because he can become very depressed if that future is not too bright. So that's why the rabbis don't always encourage consulting with these individuals. Even if they know what they're talking about, you may become depressed if it's not good. You may lose hope. And don't forget, you have to be completely faithful to Hashem in your emunah, that regardless of what is in the hand, it is possible for us to change much of that. But remember, the emphasis should always be on character more than anything else, because what makes or breaks an individual, his true accomplishments in life, is not how much money he made. That's his mazal. He cannot know one word of English, as I've told you many times, and he has more money than someone who has 3 PhDs. It has nothing to do with how intelligent you are. Whether you make money or not is all mazal. What did you do with yourself? Did you become a better person? Did you work on refining your character? Were you kind to your neighbors? Were you honest in your business dealings? This is where we're going to be judged upstairs. They're not going to ask us upstairs when we head upstairs, oh, you know you could have made more money? That's not important. It's all mazal, how much you make and how much you keep, because you can make it and then lose it. But were you a good individual? Did you respect others? Did others respect you? Did you have a good name, a good reputation for yourself? Did you observe the commandments? Did you keep my statutes, Hashem says? I sent you here for a reason. Or did you just, waste your time playing golf and eating and sleeping? What did you do with yourself? That's all free will. That will depend on a person's decision, what he makes of himself. Even though a lot of this knowledge is not known, we have a tradition. The Pasuk in Tehillim says, Sod Hashem lireyav. There will be those who will be given this information. In other words, they will have an ease in picking up this information. As the verse says, the secrets of Hashem are to those who fear Him. Those who fear God have a better chance of being able to understand these things. Anything that is a sod, anything that is a secret, is not something that just anyone can pick up. Not everyone is qualified for this. Not everyone is inclined to learn mysticism. It's just like any profession. Not everybody's going to become a doctor or a lawyer or a carpenter. It depends if you are pulled in that direction. There are some people that are pulled by astrology, by mysticism, and they immerse themselves in this area to become as familiar as possible. But still, the secrets of Hashem, Sod Hashem lire'av, those that will accomplish, those that will be able to really grasp this information better will be those that are God-fearing, that are purer, more spiritual in nature. So, what about psychics? You heard about them? They're psychics. People who claim that they are psychic. Is it true? Yeah, it's possible. It is mentioned in Judaism that there are certain abilities that every human being has, spiritual abilities. And we've spoken a little bit about them in the past lectures, that in order for the human being who's partially physical to connect to the spiritual world, there has to be some sort of bridge. There are certain latent powers that we have in us that are spiritual in nature. By some, it's more developed. By those that it's more developed, and it could be developed because of their mazal, or for some other reason, they can somehow pick up. They can pick up something from the air. Now, it's not just from the air. There's actually all kinds of energies. Let's just call it a wavelength of spirituality that they can tap onto it. They just absorb it. They connect to it. And through that wavelength or through that channel, they're able to know certain things. Once again, are they getting information from the pure camp or from the impure camp? That's what's important for us to know. A psychic may not be getting real information or information that is very useful, because if he's getting it for the impure camp, some of it could be misleading. Some of it could just be deceit. Some of it could be deceitful. Do you want to trust somebody like that? You want to trust someone. If he's just a psychic, who's to know? But it is possible. It is possible that this individual has a hunch. You've heard the word hunch. He has this feeling. Where is that feeling coming from? So the rabbis tell us there's something called mazale hazye. His mazal saw it. He didn't see it with his physical eyes. His mazal. There's some power in us that comes from the mazal. It's connected to the mazal that enables us to know certain things just because we detect it. There's something spiritual in us. We have certain spiritual powers that can detect the spiritual wavelengths. And psychics have this latent power more developed in them. For some reason, it makes no difference. So it is possible for certain individuals to pick up information from the spiritual realm and to know certain things. But those things that they will know are very, very short term. Only real prophecy can see long term, can know things with clarity, and can be certain that this is 100% true. That which is not real prophecy, it may or may not be true. It depends where it's coming from. So just because he's a psychic does not mean that all the information he's giving you, that he's providing you, is 100% real. If it's coming from the impure forces, remember, it could be deceitful. It could be wrong. It could be misleading. So always find out where is this coming, if you can. Figure out where is this coming from the pure camp or from the impure camp. There's another knowledge base, it's called rifruf evarim, movement of the limbs. All of a sudden, you have an itch on your thigh. All of a sudden, your ear is itching. Or there's some strange, unusual movement to some limb in the body that is not typical. Rifruf evarim, it's called in Hebrew. Movement of the limbs. And that could be signaling something. There may be a long-lost relative that you're going to soon meet. There may be something that you're going to hear soon that is going to make you very, very happy. Or it may just be that you're going to discover something that you were totally unaware of it existed. All kinds of things that sometimes we receive messages from above through all kinds of mediums. Rifruf evarim, the movements of limb, the sudden movement, sudden strange movement of a limb can be a form of communication. The more powerful one, however, is a dream. Dream we're more familiar with, if it's a real dream. That they communicate with us, and sometimes it's weeks before, months before, years before, about something that you can experience. And all of a sudden you ask yourself, wait a minute, where did I see this? You saw it in a dream. Oh, it's a deja vu. No, it's not. Deja vu meaning either it's a dream that you had a long time ago, or it's a reincarnation. You saw it in the previous lifetime and you remember it. So a dream is a powerful means through which we receive information, revelation that is divine, as long as it's real. Most dreams are not. So for those who want to know more about dreams, there's a whole lecture about dreams. Then we have goralot, casting lots. I began to say that there are ways for man to initiate, for him to find out certain things. Casting lots, there's all kinds of lots that one can do to figure out whether he should do something or not. Should he go there or not? Should he take this job or not? Should he buy this house or not? Casting lots, opening books. All kinds of ways to figure out whether Hashem says yes or no. This is not so simple because not every question can be asked. Not everyone is qualified to ask. And number three, not all days are propitious to ask questions of that nature. But it is possible sometimes you go to someone a very, very mystical person, a Kabbalist. He's a pure individual, and he just opens up the book for you, Tehillim, Psalms, and your question, the answer to your question is on the first verse of that page. You can do it yourself too, on condition that you're 100% pure and your emunah is with Hashem, that you know for certain you're going to receive the answer. So these things are possible. Man can initiate on his own through this energy that is out there. It's a spiritual energy that you can tap onto. If you're pure, if you know how to do it, and you're not playing around, you're asking a valid question, you don't know what to do. Rabbis have sometimes had to figure out after the Holocaust where to go, to America or to Israel. They used goralot, casting a lot. There's all kinds to figure out, and they've received the proper answer. So there are ways to get information, but you have to know what you're doing. Then there's tarots. You heard about tarot cards? That's similar. Tarots, cards. They can tell you certain things about your mazal. That's more tied to one's mazal. It's the energy of the mazal, but it's dangerous. Dangerous because it could also be connecting to the impure forces. So therefore, I don't encourage people to figure out their mazal through tarot cards. There are other ways to do it that are legitimate. Even though it may be true what the tarot cards will say, it already appears to be that it's leading you to a different venue, a different direction that perhaps may not be pure. What about a pendulum and a crystal ball? Pendulum, that which swings, crystal balls, there's all kinds of ways that various civilizations or peoples have used to try to figure out things. Don't use them. They, more likely than not, belong to the impure forces. These are all spiritual energies. They exist. You can know certain things by doing them. But if you need to know something, go with something that is acceptable and legitimate in Judaism. Then we have numerology. Numerology is also a whole different area that we don't have too much time to delve into right now. But Judaism does believe that numbers have certain powers. The number 7 appears a lot in Judaism, whether it's the menorah, whether it's the 7 days of mourning, whether it's the 7 days of rejoicing between the bride and groom. Number 7, for example, appears a lot. We've spoken briefly about numbers in the past, but numbers appear in various forms. They appear in the form of a gematria, the numerical value of a word, the numerical value of a name. The numerical value of a word or of a name is a substrate, a layer in the individual or in the word or in the text that can be insinuating, giving you additional information about something. So when you know the numerical value of something, you can know certain things. It's a substrate. In other words, it's another layer, whether it's a layer of information in the Torah, the gematria of something, or whether it's something about the individual, about his name, or about something else in his life that involves some sort of number. So yes, there is some credence to this, and it's definitely another dimension of information that can be gleaned from the Torah or from the individual, but it's not as encompassing as the reading of the hand, for example. The reading of the hand is much more encompassing than just about anything else that we've discussed so far tonight. All right, just to finish up, rabbis tell us, remember, that in the end, if you want to receive information from above, everyone is capable of it, man or woman, Jew or non-Jew. It makes no difference where you come from and who you are, as long as your deeds are meritorious. If you're a good person, you're pure, your intentions are pure, you may be able to receive information in all kinds of ways, including a dream. Because a real dream has a lot to do with what was done during the day. Did you get angry at someone during the day? Even if you're a good person, you may lose that chance of having your soul rise at night to a point where it could see things. So depending on one's behavior during the day, depending on his purity, depending on his intentions, a dream is a medium through which they reveal to him, but he has to deserve it. So it all comes down to one's deeds and one's purity. If one is honest in his speech, in his conduct, and he's pure, his intentions are pure, then most likely than not, the information that he will receive will be from a pure source. He will not be lied to. But if a person is deceitful in his character, in the way he deals with people, you think they're going to tell him information that is real? He's going to get information perhaps, but in a deceiving way. They're going to deceive him too, just like he deceives others. You therefore want to receive information that is accurate, or as accurate as possible, that is real, that is clear. Be a pure individual. Make sure that your intentions are pure. And make sure that you conduct yourself in that way. In this way, all that information that will be channeled to you, whether it's in a dream or otherwise, will hopefully come from the right source. What we've seen so far is that there's a lot that is being channeled to us from above. God created this world, but He's still in charge, He's still involved, He's still around. And He communicates with us in all kinds of ways. There's a lot of information that can be gotten from Shamayim. Hashem sends us signals all the time, but people don't have their antenna up. They're asleep. If people were to pay attention to everything that happens in their life, in their personal life, they would see that God is communicating with them. He communicates with everyone on different levels. But not everybody's antenna is up. Not everybody is paying attention to all that's going on in his life or in the world. But if they did, they would be able to see a lot. They would be able to know a lot about themselves and about others. For a Jew, however, the most important detail that he has to always keep in mind when it comes to mysticism, there's a lot of supernatural forces, incredible forces out there. There's a lot of incredible knowledge out there that one can use, perhaps, in all kinds of ways. Don't forget, however, what the Jews say from time to time in their prayer. Avinu Malkenu, Enanu Melech Elata. Our Father, our King, you are the only King that we have. We have no one else to turn to. We will therefore only rely on you. Amen. Amen.